My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 42 years old, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've worked in corporate tech sales for nearly 2 decades. I'm not flashy. I don't chase headlines or awards. I show up, do the work, and treat people with respect. But apparently, that wasn't good enough for the new guy. 3 months ago, I walked into the office like any other Monday morning. Coffee in hand. Tie slightly crooked. I had a 9 a.m. client call with Harbor Point Logistics, the biggest account our company had. I'd personally landed them back in 2019 and helped grow the partnership to over $12 million annually. By 9:05, that call was canceled by my new manager. By 9:10, I was sitting across from him in his glass-walled office, staring at a contract that slashed my salary in half. "Don't take it personally, Daniel," he said with a grin that made my stomach turn. "This is just to motivate you. You've been comfortable too long. Let's see how you perform with a little fire under you." I didn't say a word. I just stared at him, watching this guy, Jason Reed, smirk like he just taught me a lesson. He was younger than me. MBA type. Fast talker. Always quoting some business podcast or TED Talk about disruption and dominance. He wore sneakers with his suits and thought that made him a visionary. But here's the thing Jason didn't know. I wasn't just an employee. I was the only reason Harbor Point was still with us. And the moment he pushed that contract across the table, he didn't motivate me. He unleashed me. I walked out of that office with 2 thoughts in my head. 1, he had no idea what he'd just done. And 2, if he wanted a fire, I'd give him one that would burn his entire career to the ground. Before Jason Reed showed up, I loved my job. I really did. I wasn't chasing a corner office or a stock option payout. I just wanted to be good at what I did and work with people I respected. I joined the company back in 2005, when it was still a mid-sized firm run by folks who actually cared about their employees. My old manager, Rick Callahan, was the kind of leader who remembered your kids' names and asked about your weekend, and meant it. Under him, I thrived. I wasn't the loudest in the room, but I was consistent. I knew the product inside out, and more importantly, I knew how to listen to clients. Harbor Point Logistics came into my life during the fall of 2019. They were a massive shipping and warehouse client, and to be honest, no one thought we had a chance of landing them. But I saw something in their leadership. They weren't looking for flash. They were looking for reliability. And that's what I gave them. I flew to their headquarters 3 times in 2 months. Took calls on weekends. Built a custom analytics dashboard overnight just to solve one of their pain points. When they signed that $8 million contract, my name was on every slide that convinced them. Over the next few years, I became their go-to. Their CEO, Lisa Granger, even invited me to her daughter's graduation party. That's the kind of relationship we had, not just business but trust. That trust helped grow their account from $8 million to over $12 million. I never bragged about it in meetings. I didn't ask for bonuses. I just did the job. Life was simple. I had a decent house, a quiet life, and a job that made me feel like I mattered. Even when the company shifted directions and brought in new upper management, I didn't worry. I figured they'd see the numbers and recognize the value I brought. I was wrong. When Rick announced his retirement, I shook his hand and thanked him for everything. He told me, "You'll be fine, Daniel. You're the foundation of this place." But less than a month later, Jason Reed walked in with his startup buzzwords and his disruption playbook. He didn't bother learning names. He scheduled one-on-ones and didn't show up. He smiled too much and listened too little. And slowly, I felt things start to shift, not all at once, but in tiny little ways. Calls with HarborPoint started getting reassigned. My email access was updated. Suddenly, I wasn't looped in on internal planning meetings. When I brought it up to HR, they gave me the same robotic response. Just temporary restructuring. Nothing personal. But I could feel it, like standing in a room and realizing someone slowly closing the door behind you. Still, I kept my head down. I showed up. Did the work. Because that's who I am. But the moment he cut my pay in half, that was the moment I stopped believing I owed them my loyalty. The days after the salary cut were quiet, too quiet. I didn't argue. Didn't push back. That's exactly what Jason expected, I'm sure. A lot of guys in my position would have panicked. Gone to HR, pleaded for reinstatement, maybe even quit on the spot. But I've learned something over the years. Panic is loud. Planning is silent. And in that silence, I started watching. First thing I noticed was how quickly Jason started positioning himself in front of my clients. Not just HarborPoint, others too. He began replying to emails I was already on, trying to loop himself in like he'd always been there. He took my name off calendar invites. Rescheduled calls I had set up weeks in advance. I'd spent years building these relationships. Suddenly, Jason thought he could just walk in and wear my skin like a costume. He began forwarding talking points to my team, aggressive sales scripts that were totally tone-deaf. HarborPoint prided themselves on nuance, long-term planning, subtle optimization. Jason wanted quick wins, flashy numbers. He didn't understand the client, and worse, he didn't care. But he kept going. Loudly. Publicly. Always. Disrupting. Always. Streamlining. Then came the cold shoulders. Colleagues I'd worked with for over a decade suddenly acted cautious around me. Like they were afraid proximity to me might hurt their standing. I could feel the shift in the air. The fake smiles. The quick hallway conversations that stopped when I walked by. Someone, and I didn't need a name to guess who, was poisoning the well. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I got up for a glass of water and saw my phone flashing. I'd set up a simple forwarding rule a few days earlier, rerouting all client contact logs through my personal archive. And there it was, a chain of emails between Jason and HarborPoint's CFO. He was pushing them hard to renegotiate directly, trying to undercut our existing terms, promising executive-level support and better alignment without legacy personnel. I was the legacy. He was trying to push me out completely and take the credit for everything I'd built. I sat at my kitchen table for almost 2 hours, rereading every word. Not angry. Not shocked. Just still. I wasn't dealing with a manager. I was dealing with a parasite, one that had crawled into something good and was trying to hollow it out from the inside. I didn't call anyone. Didn't reply. I just closed my laptop and looked out the window. That was the night I stopped hoping things would go back to normal. That was the night I realized he wasn't just trying to erase me. He was gambling that I wouldn't fight back. A few days after that late-night email discovery, I found myself sitting in a quarterly strategy meeting, or at least what was left of it. I was still invited, but only barely. They'd moved me 3 rows back, no longer at the main table, no longer asked for input. I sat quietly observing. Jason stood at the front of the room, presenting the latest sales numbers like he was Moses coming down from the mountain. He showed a graph that included HarborPoint's growth curve, and he didn't mention my name once. Not a word. He stood there, in a room of directors and VPs, taking credit for my work. For years of relationship building, for 3 a.m. phone calls, for 27 business trips, for the trust I'd earned with HarborPoint's leadership. I sat still. No reaction. Just a slow burn building inside me. Then, after the meeting, I walked past the executive lounge. Jason was in there, talking to 2 board members, laughing. The door was cracked just enough for me to hear a few words, one of them being mine. "I'm phasing Daniel out," he said, casually, like he was talking about a spreadsheet column. "He's not built for where we're headed. Too slow. The client's loyal to him, not the company. That's a liability." That was it. I didn't need more emails. I didn't need another canceled meeting or another fake smile. I knew exactly what he was doing, and more importantly, I knew exactly what he thought of me. Not as a person. Not as a professional. Not even as a threat. Just as a stepping stone. I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened a blank Google document. Not to quit. Not yet. I started writing down everything I remembered. Every client call Jason hijacked, every lie he told, every email I'd forwarded to my archive. And as I typed, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt something far more powerful: clarity. This wasn't going to be emotional. It wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be petty. It was going to be surgical. Because if Jason thought cutting my salary would make me shrink, disappear, or beg, he was about to learn what it really looks like when a man who's been underestimated finally stops playing nice. From that day forward, every move I made had a purpose. I wasn't going to blow up, go to HR, or make a scene. That would have been exactly what Jason expected. He wanted a reaction he could use against me. So, I gave him silence. Silence and a smile. Behind that silence, I started building a case. First, I dug into the email archives. I had access to years of communication with HarborPoint, all documented, all verifiable. I organized the timeline, flagged changes Jason made, and highlighted contract violations he was attempting behind my back. I even found a few instances where he deliberately misrepresented service metrics, inflated numbers that could easily constitute fraud if ever exposed. Then, I made a few quiet calls. I reached out to Lisa Granger, HarborPoint's CEO, the same woman who once invited me to her daughter's graduation. We hadn't spoken in a few weeks, not since Jason started inserting himself into every interaction. I kept it simple. No mudslinging. No drama. I told her I was stepping back from her account due to internal restructuring, and I wanted her to be aware in case the quality of service changed. She went silent for a moment, then said, "Daniel, I had no idea you weren't still managing us." "That's not what Jason told me." Boom. That was the crack in the wall. Over the next few days, I had quiet conversations with their legal and finance teams. I wasn't whistleblowing, not yet. I was just giving them the full picture, the real one. And it didn't take long before they realized Jason had been maneuvering them, pushing them toward a renegotiation that only served his ambition, not their interests. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything on my end. I bought a cheap burner phone. Started recording every in-person conversation Jason tried to have. He liked to talk big when there were no witnesses, and now I made sure he had one every time. I didn't even need to bait him. He'd say things like, "Don't worry about HarborPoint. They'll sign whatever I put in front of them. They're too deep in." Or, "Daniel's not really part of the future here. Just let him fade out." Every word, every smirk, every arrogant boast, captured. I timed everything carefully. My resignation letter sat saved on my desktop, dated and sealed, but undelivered. I wanted to hit when it would hurt the most. HarborPoint's contract was up for renewal in exactly 3 weeks. Jason was betting his reputation, and probably his bonus, on closing the deal himself. I wasn't going to stop him. I was going to let him walk right into the meeting room, chest puffed, expecting applause. And then I was going to take the floor and pull the entire rug out from under him. The day of the contract renewal came like a perfectly set stage. I wore my best suit, not flashy, just sharp enough to look like a man who wasn't afraid to burn a bridge if the path ahead was better. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Jason was already there at 9:30, pacing like a man rehearsing his victory speech. I walked in calmly, took my seat, and waited. HarborPoint's leadership team arrived right on time. Lisa Granger gave me a surprised nod, the kind that says, "I didn't expect you to be here, but I'm glad you are." Jason stood up, launched into his pitch, and spent the next 20 minutes walking them through a deck filled with buzzwords, inflated charts, and recycled language. He was pitching them like he barely knew who they were. Like he hadn't even taken the time to understand the nuances that made our relationship work for years. Then Lisa interrupted him. "Before we move forward," she said, "we'd like to hear from Daniel." Jason froze. He turned toward me like he'd seen a ghost. I stood up, unbuttoned my jacket, and handed out folders, one for each HarborPoint executive. Inside were printouts of every manipulation Jason had attempted, misleading service reports, emails where he promised things we couldn't deliver, and, most damning of all, his statements trying to edge me out and force a renegotiation behind their backs. Then I played the audio. Clear as day, Jason's voice echoed through the conference room speakers. "They're loyal to Daniel. That's a problem. I'm phasing him out." No yelling. No accusations. Just proof. Cold, hard, quiet proof. When it ended, no one said a word. Jason tried to speak, but Lisa raised her hand. "Jason," she said firmly, "we're going to take a break. Daniel, please stay." Jason stood there, face drained, then gathered his things and left the room, humiliated, exposed, and finished. 10 minutes later, HarborPoint made it clear they would not renew the contract unless I was their direct point of contact. Not the company. Me. That was the moment I slid my resignation letter across the table, not to HarborPoint, but to my company. Effective immediately. Lisa looked at me and asked, "What's next for you, Daniel?" I smiled and said, "Something better. Something on my own terms." Jason was fired 2 weeks later. Word got out fast. The board conducted an internal review. Turns out, mine wasn't the only account he tried to hijack. He'd burned bridges all over the place. But he picked the wrong one to mess with first, mine. It's been 8 months since I walked out of that building for the last time, and not once have I looked back. In the weeks that followed, I took long walks. Slept in. Read books I hadn't touched in years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd taken my power back. I launched a small consultancy soon after. Nothing huge, just me and 2 former colleagues who'd seen what happened and reached out quietly, asking if I had room for them. I did. HarborPoint signed on with us almost immediately, followed by 2 other clients I'd worked with in the past. Not because I chased them, not because I begged, but because people remember how you treat them. And I'd always treated people with respect. Turns out, that's rarer than I thought. I don't have the 6-figure salary anymore. I don't have a corner office or a title next to my name. But I wake up every morning knowing that every dollar I earn, every deal I close, every success I build is mine. Not because someone motivated me by cutting me down, but because I never needed their permission to rise in the first place. Jason? Last I heard, he tried launching a startup, burned through investor money in 3 months, and vanished from LinkedIn entirely. But honestly, he doesn't matter anymore. Because this story was never about destroying someone else. It was about refusing to be quietly erased. It was about proving to them, to myself, that loyalty is not weakness and silence is not surrender. They took my salary. They tried to take my voice. But they couldn't take who I am. And from that, I rebuilt everything. Not for them. Not for revenge. But for me. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or told to just take it, don't. Stand your ground. And if you believe in justice done right, hit subscribe, because I've got more stories you won't believe.